Are you familiar with Arthur Devaney and his
Yeah.
and evolutionary fitness? Now, he's one who says that the repetitive type exercises, jogging and treadmills and stuff like that, isn't really all that good for your body. Whereas going back to the evolutionary aspect of it, our ancestors probably exercised intensely for 1 or 2 days, but then they would rest for 5 or 6 after they had a
Well,
source of food.
yeah, one of my favorite stories from my research was, and I'm being contrarian here, by the
Okay,
way.
okay.
Um, one of my favorite stories from my research was I interviewed this anthropologist in Australia who used to do research with the Aborigines, and she'd go live out in the bush with the Aborigines. And I mean, again, she's a believer in low-fat diets and the benefits of exercise. But she told the story of being with a group of Aborigines in the outback when one of her, with some of her colleagues, and her colleagues went for a run. And the Aborigines thought this was the funniest thing they had ever seen. The concept that anyone would willingly run when they didn't have to, they thought was hilarious. And so the question is, I mean, well, again, when you look at the anthropological literature, the hunter-gatherers were just not that active. They didn't have to work that hard for their food. They probably walked more than we did, but they weren't actually like chasing down, woolly mammoths and engaged in struggles of that nature. The question always is, are healthy people are healthy people healthier because they exercise? Or, well, let me rephrase this. Does exercise make people healthier and live longer, or the people who are inherently healthy and who are going to live longer anyway, are they the ones who choose to exercise and can keep it up?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And when I talk to this with my friends, I say, you look at the French, for instance, and the famous French paradox. I lived in France. I lived in Paris in the 1980s. There were no gyms.
Sure.
People walked a lot, but not that much. I mean, and my French friends, I wanted to drive wherever we went for dinner. I always had to beg them, can we take the subway at least? And no, they wanted to get in their cars and look for parking spots for an hour. And, they just simply were not that, and they didn't go to gyms, they didn't jog. If you jogged through the streets of Paris, I actually took up swimming because I found it too embarrassing to be jogging through the streets of Paris like the lone American. So they did have public pools, and I would go to the pools and go swimming.
Yeah, okay.
And yet they outlived us. The Swiss, a lot of Swiss probably climb mountains, but I bet a lot of Swiss don't.
Well,
and they have this
most of them live in
second
urban
longest.
areas.
And gyms were an American. I mean, there were no gyms in these cities. I lived in Geneva when I wrote my first book, and there was one new Nautilus club that had opened up that I used to go to, but that was it.
Yeah. Well, what I've seen though from the science of it. Now, I haven't really reviewed it all in depth, completely in depth. But in recent years, it seems as though exercise is almost like a magic pill as far as staving off age-related disease. And in many population studies, but also basic molecular metabolism studies, it would seem that the evidence is pretty heavily in favor of getting exercise being a good thing for people.
I think what exercise does is it helps you burn carbohydrates.
And there's the key to it, yeah?
I think that's my gut feeling. Again, based on, mostly speculation and my sense of, that it does help burn off blood sugar without, minimizing your need for insulin to do it. But again, I think healthy people are more active.
Yeah,
the question is, it's always this causality issue. And the same thing goes for people who, you could imagine that if you go on a diet, you start eating even a low-fat diet, you're going to change both the quantity and quality of the carbohydrates you consume. So you start, for instance, nobody goes on a diet and continues to drink beer and Coke and, eat pastries and desserts.
Right.
So you probably give up sugar for the most part. You probably switch give up Coke and go to Diet Coke. And you can imagine that all of this will lower your insulin levels, reduce insulin resistance, and now you're liberating immobilizing fatty acids from your fat tissue. and you can now oxidize fatty acids for fuel when your insulin levels drop. So now you've got more fuel to burn. So maybe you have, prior to World War II, these metabolism researchers would talk about the impulse to physical activity. You know, when you have fuel available, you want to burn it. You know,
Sure.
I just ate, I feel antsy, I have to go for a walk.
Yeah.
The French concept of a promenade digestif, an after-dinner walk, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine that people who change their diet lower their insulin levels, and suddenly they have the impulse to work out. So now they start going to the gym regularly. They finally keep their vows. You know, they wanted to work out. Suddenly they have an energy to do it. So now they're losing weight. The question is, they're not actually losing weight because they're exercising. They're exercising because they're losing weight. There's a fundamental difference in the causality. And the only way to know which is the true causal pathway is to do a randomized controlled trial where you take a certain number of people and randomize them into two groups and get one to exercise and one not to. And when they do those randomized controlled trials, there's really no evidence that people lose weight by doing it. Just by being told to exercise, regardless of what kind that exercise is.
Yeah.
And if they do lose weight, like in The Biggest Loser, it's a short-term effect that's akin to, an effect of starvation diet.
Right, yeah. I've seen that show.
And by the way, again, I exercise, I go to the gym, I run,
Me too. It makes me feel
better
good.
when I exercise.
Yeah, it makes me feel
probably
great.
Look better.
There's some studies that I've read that contend that exercising improves your mood and your brain function as well. And so, happier people, they exercise, and then if they're happier, they're probably eating better. They're not drowning their sorrows in ice cream and beer and all that type of thing.
It's possible. You could also argue that if you never exercise, that feeling you get where you feel antsy and miserable because you haven't been to the gym in a couple of days.
Or, I actually have anxiety dreams. If I don't get enough exercise, I'll have anxiety dreams where I'll be in a dream and I can't run. I'm trying to run, I'm trying to work out real hard, but for some reason I just can't quite burn off that energy. I can't quite get into it. Next day, I'll go for a 10-mile jog or go to the gym and work out for an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's, I have the same problem. But then again, if I never worked out, would I care?
Well,
the French who, do they care that they never work out? No.
Not so much, huh?
Probably not.
Well, last topic here. I just want to cover one last topic. Don't want to keep you here all afternoon. A very enjoyable conversation. Where do you fall on the longevity aspect of nutrition, diet, and exercise? Obviously, with the immortality.
Well, I talk about this in good calories, bad calories. As far as I could tell, whatever calorie restriction does, the benefits of longevity from calorie restriction seem to be mediated through the insulin-like growth factor pathways.
Yeah.
So you can make an argument that calorie restriction would be equivalent to being on a low-carb diet for humans.
Yeah, some people have mentioned that before, right?
Yeah, and that would be, again, but my wife also said that I blame everything on carbohydrates, which is true. So you could take it with a grain of salt when I say I think you'll, live longer and appear healthier and feel better if you don't eat carbs. But I do believe that.
Sure. Well, the gist of my question is, how do you personally feel about life extension? And obviously, you've been investigating it for a while, and you seem to have found some of the best science out there showing what is a proper diet for health. How long do you expect or do you want to live?
Wait, what was the end of that question?
Coming from my perspective and a lot of the viewers here this evening, from the Immortality Institute and other organizations that are focused on extending a healthy human life, how do you, where do you fall on that? How long do you expect to live from adopting a healthy diet, or do you desire to live past the normal, say, human lifespan, three score and 10?
Well, at the moment, I don't really care one way or the other, but I suspect when I get to